magic touch that the frontman only ever heard elsewhere in certain Steve Albini productions actually had a very simple execution.
Okay, so this is Nirvana's
No later than the 2 weeks originally planned, Nirvana flew back home essentially with a finished album. The first, and arguably most important, step of their comeback year went off without a hitch. But anyone close to the band knew that it would be their next decision that would make or break the experiment.
Okay, so here we are, The Good Show. We are
the most successful albums of
seeing Nirvana's
1992 must have been for Cobain. A nationwide
the end of Nirvana, one of the most crucial.
For much of his adult life, Kurt suffered from a mysterious stomach condition.
It's one of the most crucial moments that ever happened in rock and roll when Kurt Cobain died. It's a one big mystery that no one figured out. We just know that he contemplates suicide along the lines of Rome
and a surprisingly comfortable home life considering the custody battle and Courtney Love.
Rome
started to feel a little
better. It's the big clue as to why he tried suicide. What happened before Rome? Nobody knows. But I could have a big idea as to why. I just don't want to accuse anybody of anything. I mean,
either way, plans were made for a 4-month jaunt across North America, with punk mainstay
usually people that kill themselves is because they have a broken relationship with someone or something,
just weeks after the release of the band's third studio album in September of 1993,
and they don't feel loved enough.
That album had been successfully whittled down from "I Hate Myself and Want to Die" to verse chorus verse to the obvious best choice, "In Utero," work on the album itself was far from over. Rumors quickly began to swirl in the many months between the recording and release of In Utero that the execs over at Geffen were not happy, with demands apparently being made for a total remix. Producer Steve Albini was of the opinion that these rumors stemmed from the label themselves trying to shake the band's confidence, while Cobain seemed to imply that the accusations came from none other than Steve Albini. Basically, the whole media thing was an
Steve Albini is one of the
him to get out of the fact that he had anything to do with this. He's so into being Mr.
And he's an okay recorder. He ain't that good.
These rumors were
he made In Utero sound like it was made in a hallway of a church or a bathroom.
Producer Scott Litt to remix 2 songs, his influence was restrained. It was Nirvana's album through and through. As the September release date quickly approached, the band took on almost as many interviews as they did before Nevermind, once again making them the talk of the town. And though much of the discussion centered around the same
But the good thing about it is that In Utero sounded like Nirvana playing live inside your bedroom or something.
Not much. Novoselic would admit that there are no teen spirits on In Utero. There are 6 or 7 great songs, but no phenomenal big hit. Albini, famously no great fan of Nirvana's hits, would still basically agree. Everything that they do for the rest of their careers is going to be secondary to what they've done up until now. Not secondary in quality, but secondary in impact. To which Kurt would add that we're certain that we won't sell a quarter as much, and we're totally comfortable with that because we like this record so much.
And I don't think Kurt Cobain really liked that record that much. But I do think he liked. I really do think he liked Heart-Shaped Box. That's the thing.
The dreadful reality of what was writing on In Utero, a question best explored by Cobain's last quote in Michael Lazarat's biography. "It's too bad, because I spent almost all the money I made off Nevermind fighting for my child."
And Dom. We love Dom and Heart-Shaped Box.
I don't have anything to live off of for the rest of my
but
life.
once I started thinking
I'm not going to be set
I'm gonna have to once I opened my mind, I saw that record really did have more hits, like Serve the Servants. Serve the Servants could have had a very good video, and that song stood up till this day, just like Heart-Shaped Box did.
If lightning doesn't strike the same place twice, it can get pretty damn close. It was a turn of fate that
one of the songs I've always hated was "Rape Me." It just sounded like
Novoselic was learning to use his newfound.
It sounded very unusual to me to say something like that.
Protest that would eventually help repeal Washington's erotic music bill, and starting the Balkan Women's Aid Fund to support victims of the brutal Yugoslav wars. Dave Grohl's ambitions weren't quite so large. Always seen as the humblest in Nirvana's crew, his efforts were put towards an imminent wedding to his fiancée, a thriving reunion with his old band Scream, and maybe even a college degree. Even Pat Smear seemed to be settling well into the band. When pressed on if he'd stick around, most members gave the same sort of "I don't know" answer, but that wasn't for a lack of gratitude. Kurt even called him one of his best friends, explaining that "I look over and I see Pat's smiling face, and it just gives me a bit of hope, you know? Makes me feel good."
The bit of hope he needed to survive.
After performing in a different band with Smear. Of course, that only leaves one
and less of a headache.
Kurt Cobain, who surprisingly seemed to be doing better than anyone. Just going off of interviews from the time and the band's only official biography, he was at an all-time high. He was sober. After years of heavy drug use and a brief stint dabbling with the worst of the worst, he finally found it in himself to quit cold turkey. His stomach pain was all but vanquished as he confidently told MTV, it's gone. He even had the perfect nuclear family he'd always wanted. The same one that was ripped from him at age 9 when his parents divorced was found in the loving home he'd built with his wife Courtney. And after months of battling, he'd even gotten his daughter back permanently. He had everything he could ever want. But Kurt Cobain took his own life on April 5th, 1994.
One of the most drastic days of rock and roll, and everybody gathered together to see his funeral.
In his last Rolling Stone interview, taken in October of 1993, he explained how, "I've been relieved of so much pressure in the last year and a half. Pulling this record off, my family, my child, just little things that no one
But you could just think of all the pressure he went through.
This band.
I mean, someone trying to get off of heroin is not an easy thing.
I'm really thankful. And every month I come to more optimistic conclusions."
I mean,
how could a man who seemed
he had a chance. He had a very good chance of getting sober, but for some reason he took a left turn somewhere.
Let's take a step back. The official story was that
and once he noticed that he would take that left turn, he saw that there was no going back.
Detoxed and was fully rehabilitated
because the pressure was on.
His daughter in his own arms, essentially shutting the book on the drug chapter. This wasn't true.
That's why I don't like talking about drugs, though. I mean, I always focus more on the music, but the mystery is,
but it was Kurt who thought,
why did he take his own life after succeeding with 2 records?
With a loaded pistol and some heroin. Without getting too deep into the details,
and he did it with a loaded pistol, not overdosing.
Backslid into his drug addiction. Thankfully, the same court order that eventually took Francis away also forced Kurt into a 30-day rehab, and though he would mock this decision as redundant to the press, he would once again be forced to detox just days after the worst detox of his life. This one, at least, would stick, long enough for Kurt to fight back custody of his daughter and record a new Nirvana album. And while what I said earlier about the band rallying around Kurt as the whole world seemed to be coming down on top of him is true, the extent to which they rallied may have been exaggerated. Nirvana came together to record an album, but once they were done, they were done. They all went back to their own lives. By the summer of 1993, Kurt was back into the routine of using heroin every day.
That's the most annoying thing ever.
The once uniquely traumatizing experience of finding him overdosed became commonplace, with the 2001 biography Heavier Than Heaven positing that it may have happened as many as a dozen times during 1993 alone. In September of that year, In Utero released to wide acclaim. It was a time that should have brought a great big sigh of relief, but there is still one major question left unanswered. Would the band tour? And while in earlier interviews Kurt seemed open to the idea, he spent much of September fighting passionately to stay off the road. This put him at odds with just about everyone, not only because tours make a lot of money, but because they can significantly boost an album's sales. Which I guess is also an argument for money. But hey, money's important, especially to Kurt, whose turbulent life meant that he'd need all the cash he could get before an inevitable breakup or lawsuit. So Cobain agreed to a 4-month arena tour of North America, bringing in Pat Smear to take some pressure off him. And believe me, the pressure was mounting. In November, Nirvana agreed to perform as part of MTV's Unplugged program, where artists and bands from across the musical spectrum performed in a stripped-down acoustic styling. It was an environment that called for restraint, poise, and calm, something which Nirvana was not quite known for. Kurt was nervous, especially since he was dealing with some pretty bad withdrawals. It fell on some poor, unfortunate intern at MTV to find Cobain some Valium to get him through the worst of it, while the man himself gave the heartbreaking request that all the people who love me sit in the front. I'm scared. It was pushing past these fears and anxieties that Kurt sat on that stage. He had relied for so much of his career on the energy of the crowd and the distortion of the speakers to guide him through each performance. But as he began to strum his guitar, the crowd was deathly quiet. He played on, hardly saying a word until after the third song of the set.
I don't even think he liked Nirvana, did he?
I'm
kidding.
Of course,
at this point,
the man who sold the world, likely the greatest cover of any song possibly.
I mean, like, for him to kill himself, you would think,
by the end of the game,
I don't like Nirvana anymore.
Were significantly higher than they were prior.
And I think that's pretty big
as the
thing
rest
to say for him.
And everyone in their circle enjoyed the show's
That was his baby for a very long time.
Amy Finnerty. All night he had ducked praise and refused compliments, but as they stood together in the elevator, he couldn't help but admit the obvious. I was really f***ing good tonight, wasn't I? Unbeknownst to anyone at the time, Kurt was suffering with more than just withdrawals in his dressing room. His stomach pain was back, and with it came feelings that Cobain had wrestled with for much of his life. It's no big secret that mental illness ran in Kurt's family. At least, not these days. For years, it was discussed. Kurt was suffering with more than just withdrawals in his dressing execution.
Okay, so this is Nirvana's,
later, the 2 weeks of Nirvana flew back home essentially with a finished album. The first, and arguably most important,